It was March 15, 1977. The Sonny and Cher Show was canceled. 53 people lost their jobs. What Cher did next, no one expected. After 2 seasons of declining ratings and behind-the-scenes turmoil, the network had made its decision. The final episode would air in 2 weeks. For the 53 crew members who worked on the show, the lighting technicians, camera operators, costume assistants, stagehands, makeup artists, and everyone in between, this wasn't just the end of a television show. It was the end of their paychecks, their health insurance, their stability. Most of them had been there from the beginning, back when Sonny and Cher were America's favorite couple, singing "I Got You, Babe," and bantering with that easy chemistry that made millions of viewers tune in every week. They'd watched the marriage fall apart in real time, witnessed the painful divorce, and somehow stayed through the awkward reunion when Sonny and Cher tried to recreate the magic for television one more time. But the magic was gone. Everyone knew it, the ratings proved it, and now it was over. Tommy Chen was 28 years old and had been a lighting technician on the show for both seasons. When he heard the news, his first thought wasn't about himself. It was about his wife, who was 6 months pregnant with their first child. He'd just signed a lease on a bigger apartment, counting on this job to last at least another year. "What are we going to do?" his wife asked that night when he came home early, face pale. "I don't know," Tommy said honestly. "I'll start looking tomorrow." But Tommy knew the reality. In 1977, television production jobs didn't grow on trees. Most shows kept the same crews for years. Breaking into a new production meant knowing someone, having connections, getting lucky. And with 53 people from the same canceled show all looking for work at the same time, the competition would be brutal. The next morning, the entire crew gathered on the soundstage for what they assumed would be a brief meeting with the producers. Maybe a thank you, maybe some information about severance pay, maybe nothing at all. What they got was something none of them expected. They'd watched the marriage fall apart in real time, witnessed the painful divorce, and somehow stayed through the awkward reunion when Sonny and Cher tried to recreate the magic for television one more time. But the magic was gone. Everyone knew it. The ratings proved it. And now, it was over. Cher walked onto the stage at 9 a.m., wearing jeans and a simple black sweater, her long dark hair pulled back. No makeup, no costume, no performance. This was Cher, not the Cher the audience saw on television. She looked tired. The divorce from Sonny had been brutal, played out in tabloids and gossip columns. The reunion show had been even harder, trying to maintain professionalism with her ex-husband while the network pushed them to recreate a chemistry that no longer existed. Cher had spent 2 years smiling through pain, performing through exhaustion, being Cher when all she wanted was to be Sherilyn and figure out who that even was anymore. But this morning, standing in front of her crew, she wasn't thinking about any of that. The crew stood in a loose semicircle, some sitting on equipment cases, others leaning against cameras. The atmosphere was tense, uncertain. Most of them avoided looking directly at Cher, as if eye contact might make the situation more real. Tommy Chen stood near the back, arms crossed, trying to maintain his composure. Next to him was Maria Rodriguez, a costume assistant who'd worked in television for 15 years and had never been unemployed this long. She was 52 years old, and she was terrified. Cher took a breath and began. "I know you've all heard the news by now," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "The show's been canceled. 2 more episodes, and we're done." She paused, looking around at the faces she'd seen almost every day for 2 years. The people who'd made her look good on camera, who'd fixed her makeup when she'd been crying between takes, who'd quietly dimmed the lights when she and Sonny had another fight backstage. "I want to start by saying something that probably doesn't mean much right now, but I need to say it anyway. This show failed. That's the truth. The ratings weren't there, the chemistry wasn't there, and I take responsibility for that. Sonny and I both do." A few people shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they'd expected. "But here's what I want you to know," Cher continued, her voice growing stronger. This show failing is not your failure. Every single person in this room did exceptional work. The lighting, the costumes, the camera work, the sound, all of it was professional, creative, and excellent. You did everything right. We're the ones who couldn't hold it together. Tommy glanced at Maria. Her eyes were wet. So here's what's going to happen, Cher said. I've spent the last 2 days on the phone with my lawyer and my accountant, and we've worked something out. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, a handwritten list covered in notes and numbers. Every single person who works on the show is going to receive 6 months of salary, Cher said, paid in full. You'll get your first check next week and then monthly payments for the next 5 months. That should give everyone time to find new positions without having to panic or take the first job that comes along just to pay rent. The soundstage went completely silent. Tommy felt his knees go weak. 6 months? 6 months of salary? Additionally, Cher continued, I'm going to personally write a letter of recommendation for anyone who wants one, and I'm going to make phone calls. I know people at other networks, other production companies. I can't promise I can get everyone a job, but I can promise I'll try. Maria Rodriguez had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. One more thing, Cher said, and now her own voice was shaking slightly. I want each of you to know that you're not just crew members to me. You're the people who showed up every day and did your jobs with professionalism and kindness. Even when things were falling apart, you kept this show running when Sonny and I couldn't keep our marriage running, and I will never forget that. She folded the paper and put it back in her pocket. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more time, she said quietly. I'm sorry the show is ending like this, but I'm not going to let you fall. That's a promise. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Tommy Chen started clapping. Just him, alone, his hands coming together in the silent soundstage. Maria joined him. Then someone else. Then another person. And within seconds, all 53 crew members were applauding, many of them crying, all of them understanding that they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Cher stood there, visibly emotional, and nodded once. Then she walked off the stage, not because she was done, but because she couldn't hold it together anymore. The checks arrived exactly when Cher promised they would. 6 months of full salary, no strings attached, no requirements to pay it back. Tommy Chen used that time to take a few night classes in cinematography while job hunting. The breathing room Cher gave him meant he could be selective, could wait for the right opportunity rather than taking anything out of desperation. 4 months later, he landed a position on a new sitcom. It paid better than the Sonny and Cher Show had. Maria Rodriguez used her 6 months to finally pursue something she'd dreamed about for years, costume design instead of just assistance. She put together a portfolio, took meetings, and eventually landed a job as a lead designer on a smaller production. It was the break she'd been waiting for her entire career. Story after story like this played out across the 53 crew members. The 6 months of security Cher provided didn't just keep them afloat, it gave them the freedom to make better choices, to pursue better opportunities, to not settle out of fear. But perhaps the most important thing Cher did was the phone calls. She called producers, directors, network executives. Sometimes she called people she barely knew, relying on her name and reputation to get through. And every conversation was the same. I have someone from my crew who's exceptionally talented. Will you meet with them? She didn't ask for favors for herself. She spent her capital on other people. 30 years later, in 2007, the Emmy Awards ceremony was underway at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. The category was Outstanding Cinematography for a Comedy Series, and when the winner was announced, a man in his late 50s walked to the stage with tears in his eyes. His name was Tommy Chen. He accepted his Emmy, held the golden statue for a moment, and then began his speech. I want to thank the cast and crew of our show, Tommy began, his voice thick with emotion. But I also need to tell you a story because this Emmy wouldn't exist without something that happened 30 years ago. The audience quieted, sensing something unusual was coming. In 1977, I was a lighting technician on the Sonny and Cher Show, Tommy said. When the show was canceled, I was 28 years old, about to become a father, and terrified about what came next. 53 of us were out of work overnight." He paused, looking down at the Emmy. "Cher called us all together on that soundstage, and she did something I've never forgotten. She paid us 6 months of salary out of her own pocket. She wrote letters of recommendation. She made phone calls to help us find work. She didn't have to do any of that. The show was over. She could have walked away." Tommy looked directly at the camera. "But she didn't walk away. She said something I'll never forget. 'You kept this show running when we couldn't. And then she kept us running when we couldn't do it ourselves.'" His voice broke slightly. "That 6 months gave me time to take cinematography classes, to find the right job instead of any job, to build a career instead of just survive. And 30 years later, I'm standing here with an Emmy in my hands because Cher believed that crew members mattered as much as stars." The audience erupted in applause. In the front row, several people were crying. "So thank you, Cher," Tommy said, holding up his Emmy. "This is yours as much as mine. You taught me that success isn't just about your own career. It's about lifting up the people who helped you along the way. Thank you for lifting me up when I needed it most." The camera cut to Cher in the audience. She was wiping her eyes, clearly moved, shaking her head slightly as if to say, "I didn't do anything special." But she had, and Tommy Chen wasn't the only one who knew it. In the years that followed, the story of what Cher did in 1977 became something of a legend in the television industry. Crew members talked about it. Producers heard about it. It became a standard, not always met, but always remembered, of how stars should treat the people who make them look good. Maria Rodriguez, the costume assistant who'd been 52 and terrified, went on to design costumes for multiple television series and eventually won her own Emmy. At her acceptance speech in 2010, she said simply, "In 1977, someone gave me 6 months to figure out who I wanted to be instead of who I had to be. That gift changed my life." Other crew members from that show went on to successful careers. Camera operators became directors of photography, stagehands became production designers, makeup artists opened their own studios. Not all of them won Emmys or became famous, but all of them remembered that when things fell apart, someone caught them, and many of them, when they later had positions of power themselves, remembered to catch others. Cher never talked about it publicly. When reporters asked about the canceled show, she'd give brief answers about creative differences or timing not being right. She never mentioned the 6 months of salary, never brought up the phone calls or the letters of recommendation. It wasn't until years later, in a rare interview, that someone asked her directly about it. "Is it true you paid your crew for 6 months after the show was canceled?" Cher paused, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Yeah," she said finally. "I did." "Why?" Cher thought about it for a moment. "Because they didn't fail," she said simply. "The show failed. Sonny and I failed. But those people showed up every day and did excellent work. They held that show together when we couldn't hold our marriage together. And when something fails, the people who tried the hardest shouldn't be the ones who suffer the most." She paused. "Also, I had the money and they didn't. It seemed like the only thing that made sense." Today, the story of the Sonny and Cher Show cancellation is remembered not for the show itself, but for what happened after. It's taught as a case study in leadership courses, how to take responsibility, how to protect your team, how to use privilege to lift others. Tommy Chen, now retired and in his 70s, still has his Emmy on display in his home. Next to it is a framed photograph from that final day on the soundstage in 1977, Cher standing with her crew, smiling despite everything. And whenever someone asks him about his success, about his Emmy, about his career, Tommy tells them the same thing. None of it happens without March 15, 1977. None of it happens without someone deciding that people matter more than television shows. None of it happens without Cher teaching me that when you have the power to help, you help. No questions, no conditions. You just help. The story of Cher and the Sonny and Cher Show crew reminds us that true leadership isn't about success, It's about what you do when things fail. Anyone can be generous when things are going well. The real test of character is what you do when everything falls apart. Do you protect yourself first, or do you protect the people who depended on you? Cher chose to protect her crew, and 30 years later, that choice mattered more than any television show ever could. Once. Because success is temporary. Television shows get canceled, careers end, but the way you treat people, especially when you don't have to, especially when nobody's watching, that lasts forever. 53 people learned that lesson in 1977, and some of them spent the next 30 years teaching it to others. That's not just leadership, that's legacy. If this story moved you, remember, you don't need to be famous or wealthy to lift others up. You just need to care enough to try. Share this with someone who uses their privilege to help others, because kindness isn't just nice, it's the most powerful force in the world.